Hello, family, and welcome to another episode of Role Model Makers Experts Cafe. I'm your host, Dr. L, the Parent Whisperer, and today with me, I have an amazing lady. Her name is Sainoor. Did I say that correctly?
You did.
Very good. And she came to our community. I loved her energy and how she shows up in the world. And I think that what she's going to be talking about is important for both parents as well as kids. So we're going to go ahead and have her introduced. Thank you and welcome for being here, Sainur. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and why you do what you do, why it's important? And audience members, thank you for tuning in. Cheers.
Thank you. I'm honored to be invited, first of all. So for that, I thank you very much. And thank you for the lovely introduction. Um, the business I do right now is hypnosis and nutrition and Akashic record readings. And I'm excited that I'm also a Montessori teacher. So I've worked in different parts of the world. And I was very blessed to be able to work in Tokyo and in Beijing. And I've traveled a lot. I love traveling. And it wasn't, teaching was not my first choice. I sort of drifted into it. I started off in the science world, where I got my bachelor's in biochemistry, and then I was going to become a doctor. And life has a way of doing things. Instead, I became a medical lab technologist, and then I thought, okay, I've reached a point where I need something else. And then and I used to do a lot of volunteer teaching. I've done a lot of volunteer teaching in my community, and I got trained to preach as well. And I was told, oh, you're a good teacher, a good teacher. And so I went into Montessori teaching. And that's when I discovered that I was good with kids. Who knew? And so it has been a wonderful journey. And then sort of I was teaching, I've taught 6 to 15-year-olds, even though my favorite is the 13 to 15, the junior high. That is my favorite age.
Right.
And so between all that, I must say that I've had a wonderful journey.
Wonderful.
So I hope that answers your question a little
Yes.
bit.
Absolutely. And one of the questions I had for you, because you've gone the whole gamut from science all the way to now Akashic Records. So how did you decide, especially with Montessori? My kids go to Montessori school, so I'm very familiar and big supporter of that method of education. How did you get to this part where you're talking about things now about nutrition and Akashic Records?
Well, it's an interesting question that a lot of people ask me, but the only way I see it is my professions find me. I'm somewhere where someone says something and I think, oh. So when I decided I wasn't going to go to med school and I was just going through the university library and the medical lab thing fell upon my lap. I kid you not, it fell open and that's how I ended up there. With Montessori, when I was told I was a good teacher, I didn't want to do public school teaching.
Mhm.
So my sister, who did go into public school teaching, and she started her own Montessori school afterwards, recommended that I do Montessori teaching.
Wow.
And then when I was doing Montessori teaching, I thought I need something else. So a friend recommended, or at that time, I used to get a cold very quickly. I would get very sick, and I thought, oh, something is not right. So I was teaching, I had started a junior high program in Ottawa at that time. And I used to go pick up alternate health magazines. And I remember reading in there that someone was offering or herbal course called also called kinesiology, where you can test your body.
Right.
And I thought, I don't want to do anything until I understand what it is. So I went to the workshop, and it turned out to be given by a wonderful woman who was also a naturopath. And she sort of took me into this area of our life that I wasn't even completely familiar with. And in there, I joined a university where they required me to explore as many different alternate health practices as possible. So I put it out there. I would tell everyone, and someone who knew me told me that there was a hypnotist that's willing to talk to me. I had to have so many hours of observation.
Mhm.
So She asked me to bring someone. I had a friend who couldn't swallow pills. So I took her to the hypnotist, and the hypnotist looks at me and she says, "Oh, you have the perfect voice to be a hypnotist." And I remember someone saying, "People will pay you for this?" That's what I mean by saying that it chooses me. So this
Absolutely.
is how I drifted into it. I hope that it's a long way of giving you an answer.
No, 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 that was beautifully said. And that whole evolution of a person, their journey as who they are, and finding their identity and their place in the world, that is what we want for our kids to be able to actually go through that process. So I feel that you're very lucky that you've had that opportunity to be able
I
to.
agree.
Right.
And I remember when I was teaching my students, I was in Tokyo at that time, I can't remember. I remember telling that you may find this strange, however, everything I have learned in life, I have used,
Right.
either in teaching you or sharing things with you, not just the science and the math part,
Right.
but also the life part about how we should bring ourselves, how we should be with ourselves.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
I agree with you. I feel very blessed, and I feel blessed that I listen to me.
Exactly. Actually, so I know we can focus the conversation on anything, but when I look at some of the stuff that you're talking about, whether it's Montessori, which is really centered around the love of learning and the child's curiosity. So unless you stop and listen to that inner voice, the curriculum doesn't really matter. To another point, which is, you're talking about Akashic records, which is again getting in touch with who you really are, your identity. And then hypnosis again, which is sometimes, your conscious mind is getting in the way of you actually manifesting and bringing about what you're truly programmed to do. So many of these things have that tone to them. So I'm assuming that a big part of this becomes the identity and getting in tune with the identity, both kids, both as parents wear many hats, right? So sometimes it's easy for us to lose our own sense of identity. You're the mom, you're the husband, you're the wife, and you're so as a result, it's like, well, what was I about before all of this stuff happened, right?
I agree. So
So
beautifully said. And I agree with you completely. And one of the things I discovered when I started teaching is that everyone in the world believes they can teach, and
mhm.
everyone in the world believes they can be a better parent. And interesting thing is when COVID hit, all of a sudden people realized, oh my God, it's not so easy. So COVID did do something good. But I remember as I was thinking about our interview, it reminded me of the Aesop's fables about the miller, the son, and their donkey.
Right.
And you know how they're traveling on the road. And the first time they're going to go sell their donkey. And they're going down, and they go through, and people say, look at these two silly people. They are walking next to the donkey when they can ride. So the father gets on the donkey. No, he puts his son first, I believe. And as they're going down, some other people say, well, look at you. You're going to spoil your son while you are walking behind him. That's such a silly thing to do. How will your son become a strong man? So they switch places. So they go further down. And someone else says, oh my God, what a selfish father. Right? Here he's riding the donkey when the sun is so, he puts the sun behind him. And they go further down, and someone says, what are you going to do with the donkey? And he says, we're going to sell it. They said, how will you sell a donkey with two of you sitting on him? He's going to be too tired. You should be carrying the donkey. So they tie him, and now they carry him on a pole between the two of them. And they go down, and now the townspeople gather around, and they're laughing so hard that the donkey gets so frightened, and they're walking over the bridge, and it falls into the water and drowns.
Mm,
And the reason I brought it up, and I think anyone can look it up, it's a much longer story, is this is what parenting and teaching is like, isn't it?
right.
I find often parents are so afraid of being called bad parents, they don't listen to their inner voice.
Right. Absolutely.
And what ends up happening is that they are like the man and the child and the donkey. In my mind, the donkey is the way we work with people.
Right.
And if we are so busy listening to what everybody's telling us to do, we end up losing ourselves.
Right. Absolutely. All
So
right. So in this particular area that we're talking about, and this might be different than what we intended, but that's okay. What are some of the challenges that you see when it comes to families, people who are approaching you? What are the typical problem areas that you see people approach you for?
Okay, so I think even as teacher, when I used to have parents come in for conferences or to talk to me, and people approaching me now, they're very similar.
Mhm.
Most parents and most people want to be happy and they want their children to be happy. But as I was telling you in the story, they don't always know which is the right way to go about it. They're so busy going through the internet and going through Facebook and going through this. And I remember someone had a new baby and they hired a baby whisperer. And I kid you not, I'm just, okay, what is a baby? Oh, well, they tell you how to bring your child up. For me, that was why? How can someone tell you how to bring your child up when the child has to grow up in your milieu, in your environment?
Right.
And so some of the issues that parents come with is this disconnect with where they feel they want to be and where they are with their family, with their children, with themselves.
Right.
So often parents will come to me first because they are doubting themselves. They don't know if they're listening to themselves correctly, or they're getting, they are frustrated and they are upset and they are too busy blaming themselves. And they lose their confidence, not only to be a parent, but to be themselves. And often the children follow after.
I hear this all the time that people say, I'm never going to be like my parents. And then when they become parents, all of a sudden, all the advice that they were giving out, they, they realize it wasn't as applicable. And now they're turning into their parents because that's the working model that was programmed into them.
This is going to say that's familiar. Right?
Exactly. So the end result is they end up many times, like if anything goes wrong with the situation, then there's the shame, the blame. I'm a bad parent. I don't have time. There is the work-life balance, all of these things. And you come home, and if there's any issues, you're like, maybe I'm just not being a good parent. And how did I get on this track? So that is a really important point at that point for them to actually listen to what you're saying, which is, let's figure out what it is that I want, and then go forward with that and figure out how to implement it. Beautifully.
I think one of the biggest issue is trusting yourself. And I know when I first started my business, I wanted to call it Help Yourself. Because I believe we all have innate wisdom. But I couldn't because it was already taken. And so I ended up with another name. And then when I was in Beijing, the person who was looking after my business, I don't know what happened. And I lost the name of my business. So I came up with this name while I was in Beijing. But either way, it's to be the best you can be.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think that a lot of us don't know how to do that and how to teach that.
Right.
So I do not believe in having people lean on me all the time, if that makes sense. I believe in teaching them how to help themselves.
Exactly. Yep. I used to say that in private practice as well. I'm like, I'll be more than happy to just get you well enough so that you can walk out that door. But then every 6 months you end up coming back here. It might be better for my pocketbook, but I'm doing a disservice to you because you're coming for learning how to take care of yourself as opposed to how to be taken care of, basically. So that was the main focus. Anyways, we digress. So Sainoor, what are some of the suggestions or tips that you have for our audience members that are listening to this, as far as things that they can do and change things for the better after watching this video?
I think that the biggest tip that I give parents first, or people, not just parents, but people, is first to take a deep breath. Because breathing, as you know, being a doctor, allows oxygen to flow and your brain to start functioning again. The second is to take a step back. If you're this close, you can't see what's happening. You really need to shift away. And Albert Einstein said that the problem cannot be solved in the same place that it was created for, and I believe it's for that reason. Right. If the problem is here, I need to look at it from here. Right. So I always say, take a deep breath and Get some distance. Go
Absolutely.
for a walk if it's a situation. Learn to take a breath and say, I don't want to talk to you right now. I know when my students made me very angry, I would say, right now, I'm really angry. I think we need to be apart from each other.
Mm.
When we are both calm, we will talk to each other. Or if the child was really upset, I'd say, not right now, because they're thinking from a different brain.
Right.
So always distance, breath and distance, I believe. And I think just walking, doing a mundane job like cutting or sweeping or cleaning, it has a lot of power. Also, if you work with your child in silence, let's say you're cooking in silence, the children automatically start talking. They start telling stories, they start sharing. And it's very important for the parent to just take a deep breath and just listen.
Right.
Listen to what the child or the person is not saying. So that would be my two biggest, and to trust. Listen to what the heart is saying, not what the mind or what someone here is saying or someone here is saying.
Right. And those are beautifully said. And it's more than just 2 points. There was a lot of points there. Let's analyze this really quickly because I know our time is limited. First of all, there's breath, neurology. I often say that it's actually oxygen is more important than food. Just think about if you hold your breath, how long can you survive? If you don't eat, how long can you go? So oxygen clearly is a priority, and you want to make sure you breathe. The other one you said, remove yourself. And I think we need to differentiate this because sometimes people talk about removing. There is the physical removal, there is the mental and emotional removal, there is social removal and spiritual removal. There are circumstances that spiritually test you. And unless you remove yourself from the situation, you might not be able to find the answer to move forward in your spiritual development. Basically, that's what it comes down to. Now, the other thing that you mentioned was the importance of silence and holding that space for the children to express themselves in that silence. Oftentimes there is events, there is distractions, programs, music, like there's so much stuff constantly bombarding us that there is no room for self-expression. And the kids happen to go along with it, but then in the process, they end up losing their identity because they never practice expressing it. And just like any other muscle, if you don't express it, it doesn't develop, right? So it's very important. So thank you for all of those. And because time is of concern here, can you tell our audience members how can they connect with you and find out more ways of benefiting from your gifts?
Yes, I can. They can email me at freedom, FREEDOM, at the number 2, the letter B, hypnosis, HYPNOSIS.com, or they can go to my website, 2bhypnosis.com. So the number 2, the letter B, HYPNOSIS.com.
Wonderful. Sainoor, I love having these conversations with you, and I know that we can talk a lot more about this. One of the things I want to invite our audience members is, number one, role model the behavior that it is okay for you not to have all the answers, that you can reach out and ask for help. And also the fact that you trust that this world has answers from supporting and giving people for you, people who have your best interest at heart. It's not a big, bad, and scary world. We need to teach our kids to connect, to reach out. And in this environment that is globalized, kids are finding themselves more and more isolated. And I think part of that is because we are all going into our own bubbles. So please role model the behavior, connect with Sainoor, connect with support, be part of communities that have your best interests at heart. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you click subscribe so you can get notifications of all the experts like her that show up on this channel, share their gifts and expertise. And Sainoor, thank you again for taking the time out of your busy day to be here and share with us. We'd love to have further collaborations. Any final words for our audience members before we finish today?
I'm very honored to be here, and thank you for inviting me. And just be true to you. Be kind to yourself. We are all going through life together. So first of all, be kind, be true to you. It's a wonderful way to model, I believe, is to by being true to yourself, you teach everyone around you how to be better connected.
Well said. Well said. Beautiful. Until next time, cheers.
Thank you. Bye bye.